Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, featuring stories from the oral history website voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life stories for present-day listeners and for generations to come. Our entire collection is available on the website voicesofoklahoma.com. Subscribe to be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. Here's another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com. Born near Chelsea, Oklahoma, Gerome Riley attended a rural all-black school through the 8th grade. And because of segregation, he had to choose between going to Claremore, Nowata, or Veneta for high school. He selected Claremore Lincoln and became a member of Claremore's only boys basketball state championship team in 1952. Gerome was a member of the Claremore Clowns, a local baseball team of all-black players who played against teams at Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas. The Clowns were considered a semi-pro team. The end of school segregation in the early 1960s meant the end of the Claremore Clowns. Riley worked 37 years for Phillips Oil Company. He started out as a porter at the Will Rogers Turnpike Station at the Claremore Gate and eventually became the station's final manager. He retired in 1995. Gerome became a student of black history, and as a living part of that history, he contributed his knowledge to the Claremore Museum of History. Listen to Gerome tell his story of experiencing all the indignities of growing up in segregated Claremore, Oklahoma, on the Oral History website and podcast, voicesofoklahoma.com.
My name is John Erling, and today's date is December 1st, 2021. Gerome, would you state your full name, please?
My full name is Gerome Riley.
No middle name?
No middle name, and it's spelled with a G and not a J.
Right, and why was it spelled with a G?
Well, I really don't know, but on my birth certificate, I had to have it amended because they had my name spelled wrong, and my sex was female instead of male. And what happened back then during those days, we didn't go to doctors. They were midwives. Of course, they were registered to the state to deliver babies and so forth. And their spelling and dates weren't all that accurate. And I guess that's why mine ended up with a G instead of J. Most Jerome, this day and time is spelled with a J.
What is your date of birth?
October 18th, 1934.
Your present age?
My present age is 87 years old.
87 years old.
87 years old.
And you're blowing and going, aren't you?
Still blowing and going by the help of my walker here.
Did you have family members that lived at this age?
Yeah, out of our family. Brothers and sisters, my mom and dad, and all of them's gone. I'm the only one left. Unfortunately, all of them died of cancer. My two brothers, my dad, and my sister. Of course, my mother lived to be 92, and she just died of old age.
Yeah.
She didn't have a real sickness or something like that was taking her down. Yeah.
We are recording this interview here in Claremore in the law office of Stratton Taylor. You're a good friend of Stratton Taylor, I know.
Right.
We're in the sports conference room, and he's a big baseball fan, as you are. I am too, by the way.
Right.
And I see a picture over there of Chicago Cubs Stadium. There's Mickey Mantle over there. We have Will Rogers there, and some other sports memorabilia, and we're glad that Stratton made this room available to us for this very important interview. Where were you born?
I was born in Chelsea, Oklahoma. Chelsea, Oklahoma is a small town on Highway 66, about 40 miles north of Tulsa, Oklahoma, about 18 miles north of Claremore.
Tell me your mother's name.
My mother's name was Georgie Carter. That was a maiden name, Georgie Theresa Carter.
Where did she grow up?
She grew up also in the Chelsea area.
And then she was a mother homemaker, I suppose?
Just the homemaker.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had two brothers and one sister.
And as you've already said, they are deceased now.
They're all deceased.
What was your mother's personality like?
Mom was a loving person, a Christian lady. Everybody loved her. She never met a stranger, and she was just an all-out Christian lady. She opened the doors to anyone, strangers, not strangers, and sometimes we would be afraid some of the people would stop by and want a meal or want something to eat or drink. She never turned them down. She always invited them in, and that was her trait. She was always a loving person of people. I think that's where I got a lot of my giving and loving and not expecting anything in return, just being a good human being, God-loving person. And that's the way my mom was. And I praised her and so proud of her and hope to see her one day up yonder.
Yes. Your father's name?
Sylvester Robert Riley Sr.
Did he come from the Chelsea area?
He came also from the Chelsea area.
And he grew up there. What was his personality like?
He was also a loving person. Everybody respected my dad. They all called him Seal. Everybody in Chelsea there, they just loved him. They loved my dad. They did so much for us because my dad was a loving person. He was also one that never met a stranger, did things for people. Everybody in Chelsea just loved our family and my dad. And he's the one that set the stage for all of us because he was such a loving person, and everybody there in Chelsea knew him and respected him, and it was just amazing. A lot of the things that people did for us there in Chelsea back in the day before integration.
What did he do for a living?
Well, my dad, the first job that he had that I know was shining shoes. And back in those days, there was a lot of blacks. They did that, shine shoes. Shoe shine was 15 cents. And there was me and my two brothers and mom, and we were living on that. We also cleaned up the bank in Chelsea, and they paid us $15 a month. That's what we lived on. But back in those days, things was cheap, that it's just as much money then as it is now. I mean, as far as being able to buy things like bread, a nickel a loaf, and this type of thing. So the money part of it wasn't a big factor. You got just as much of it out of it then as maybe more than you do now. But he shined shoes there, and then we cleaned up the bank every evening. And later on, he left the shoe shine parlor and went to work for C&L Chevrolet in Chelsea, Oklahoma. He worked there for a number of years. After they closed down, he moved to Veneta. He didn't move to Veneta. He drove back and forth. He'd come home every Wednesdays and on weekends. He worked at the Chevrolet garage over there in Veneta until he came back home and started doing other work and spent the rest of his days there at home in Chelsea.
We should point out we're hearing the sound of the trains off in the distance. We're here in Claremore, and they come through, so you'll hear the train whistle, which I always enjoy hearing.
Yeah.
There's something kind of neat about it. Anyway, that's going on in the background for those who are listening. All right, so as you grew up in Chelsea, talk about your schooling there. Did you go to Chelsea public schools?
The schools in Chelsea, back in those days, they were segregated. You had a certain area that blacks lived, as you do now. The blacks and white were separated. There was always a separation point from the black community and the white community. And most times, the railroad track divides the black and white communities, but it didn't in Chelsea. We just had a certain dividing line that we knew where the black community lived. And during that time, there were quite a few blacks that lived there in Chelsea, and a lot of us were kin. And we had a one-room school. It only went to the 8th grade. Had the 1st through 8th grades there. That's where I went to school. Paul Lawrence Dunbar was the name of the school. Once you finished the 8th grade, you had to come to Claremore, Veneta, or Norwater to go to high school, which they had black high schools. And the schools hadn't integrated. That's why you had to go. But it was a one-room school. Everybody was in the same classroom. What made it interesting, all of the students had to help fix lunch. We didn't have a cook. We didn't have a lunchroom. The students took off about 11 o'clock and started preparing lunch for the whole school. That's how we got our lunch fixed. But the teacher would advise us on a lot of stuff, and we learned how to cook. One thing that I think about is me and my classmate, it was our turn to fix a dinner. We had beans and cornbread for lunch. And the teacher told my classmates, they make sure and put some fat in that cornbread, you know, like cooking all of this and that. And of course, I didn't know what was going on. And when I turned around, he had chopped up a lot of little small pieces of bacon and put in the cornbread and stirred it in. But it turned out to be really good.
Yeah.
It turned out to be really good. In fact, I mean, he didn't know it, but that was out before we called crackling bread.
No.
It's cornbread with pork rind skins in it, and it's good. But that's how that happened. Then during Christmas time, back then we made our own toys, we made our own decorations for a Christmas tree. In December, I think probably a couple of 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas, the boys would take off and go cut a Christmas tree. We'd have to walk about a couple of miles, but we always look forward to that time to getting off to go get the Christmas tree. Yeah. We'd go cut a big Christmas tree and bring it back. And they were just plain old cedar trees that grow wild out here. But we would bring it back and we would make our own decorations for it and put on that tree. The teachers that we had there, our first teacher, her name was Mrs. Carolyn Gray. She lived here in Claremore, but she taught in Chelsea there. She taught us at Chelsea. And at one time, she lived with us. She lived with us while she was teaching up there. We lived in a house that only had 4 rooms. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room. She took one of the main bedrooms there, and me and my brothers and mom and dad and them all crowded in the other bedroom. After that, she retired, got sick. Another teacher came in, her name was Mrs. Brewster. She was from Nowata. She lived there in Chelsea, but she moved in a house there and renovated it, and that's where she lived. She taught us a lot about cooking. That lady taught us about how to make cakes, how to beat them, and how to make them to where there wouldn't be air bubbles in them, and so forth. We learned a lot from her, and at home, watching Mom, being there watching her cook and prepare meals and everything. The house that we lived in, there wasn't any installation there, and there were only 2 stoves in the house. One in the living room and the kitchen, the cook stove. Us boys, each of us had a morning to make the fire. We had to get up in the morning and make the fire. What we did, we always made sure that we had plenty of kindling, plenty of dry wood, because if it got wet, boy, I'll tell you, it was a problem. But anyhow, we always made sure that we brought in plenty of wood and it was dry. We'd get up and make the fire. In those days, when the fire went out and you went to bed, there was no fire in the house. And it was down to freezing and below, so you can just imagine what we went through those days. Sometimes we would wake up in the morning. We always had a bucket there for drinking water and a dipper in it. Sometimes it'd be ice on the water in our drinking water bucket, so you know how cold it was in that house. And what we would do a lot of times, before we went to bed when it was real cold, we would warm bricks on the stove, and then we would put them to our feet at night in the bed to kind of keep us warm. That's the living conditions. And like I say, those houses weren't insulated. You could see cracks here and cracks there. And in the wintertime, we would take around the windows, we'd stuff old stockings or rags or something, anything in there to keep that cold air out. I'll tell you what, those were the days, and I don't know whether the youngsters this day and time could have went through that. I wonder about it sometimes. I talk to my kids about it, and they can't believe the things that I was telling them, but that's the way it was, and I lived it. By the way, the school, once we graduated from Dunbar and Chelsea, we came to Claremore to go to school.
And I want to get into that. In your house, did you have electricity and plumbing?
I'm glad you mentioned that. There wasn't any electricity, there wasn't any water, there wasn't any plumbing, there wasn't a telephone. We had to carry our water a couple of blocks away. There's a white lady that lived a couple of blocks from us, from the black community. Her name is Mrs. Martin. She had a hydrant outside. We didn't have all of the utilities only went to the white part of town. It didn't come down to the black community, which was still in the city limits. But they did not put electricity and water down there until a long period after that. We would pack water from Mrs. Martin's house for drinking water. And when we did our washing, our clothes, there was a creek that run down through the community. And that creek had nice clear water in it, and that's what we used that to wash. And we used homemade soap, lye soap. We always butchered a hog every year, and you take that grease and lye, put it in a big pot and put it outside. You make a fire and you put this big pot over it, and you put this lye and pork drippings in there and stir it. And I don't know what else Mom put in it. But we'd even take a bath with that soap. That was lye soap, but we'd even take a bath with that soap. By the way, during that time when we were up at Chelsea, I like to talk about that, and give all the information I can about it, because there's a lot of things that happen that a lot of people don't believe. But what we did, every winter we butchered a hog. And when we butchered that hog, we didn't have a smokehouse or anything to smoke them like they do now, We had a shed. Well, when we would butcher that hog, we would take that salt and salt it down. That's to preserve it. It would stay there and keep all winter until spring. But when you salted it, whenever you went to eat it, you had to boil the salt out of it before you cooked the meat, because you couldn't eat it with salted. Sometimes we would go out there to the shed to get some meat, and when we'd go out there, we'd seen where rats had been eating on one end of it. Well, all we did was just cut that part off and just go ahead on with it. It didn't affect it, because they couldn't stand it. It's too salty for them, too. But we boiled the salt out of it. But anyhow, those days were back in the days where food and everything was rationing. You had to have war ration stamps to buy anything, gas, groceries, everything. You had to have stamps. I've got some of those stamp books that I kept that we used back then. You couldn't buy any gasoline, clothes, everything. And that was back during the war. Whenever you got loaves of bread back then, they didn't slice them. They came to you whole. They didn't slice the bread. If you didn't have a bread knife or somebody to slice it, we just tore it off in chunks. That's the way we did it at the table. And margarine, your oleo that we used, it wasn't colored like it is now. It was like Crisco shortening, and they put a package of yellow food coloring in there, and you had to stir it in there to make it yellow. That's the way the margarine came then.
Yeah.
Back during the war.
December 7th, 1941. Do you remember that day? Pearl Harbor?
That was the Pearl Harbor bombing, yeah. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, then we got into war with them. That's when this war ration and all of this stuff came out, where everything was rationed. In Prague, they had what they call the powder plant over there in Prague, where they made ammunition and powder for the service. Now, a lot of people worked there, and gas was rationed. You could only get so much gas. Now, all of the guys that was working, they got more gas than anyone. Then the farmers, they got a share of it more. Then the people that wasn't working, they just got it barely enough to keep them going. They didn't get a whole lot of gas. But everybody had a sticker on their window when they went to the service station, well, they call them gas stations. They had a sticker on the window like a E, a F, a G, and that let the attendant know how much gas that he could get. He also had his stamp with him. That's how that was. And by the way, as the creek that ran through the community there, I don't know, it didn't have a name that I know of. It wasn't a deep creek, but it had some fairly deep places in it, about waist deep, and we used to fish in there and catch perch and little catfish and this and that to eat. We made our own fishing poles. We didn't buy no hooks and all of that stuff. We made our own. But if it rained a lot, this creek would rise, and we'd have to get out. Now, of course, it never did get in our house, but it got all around our house. I never shall forget, my uncle lived there too, beside us. We all got in his car, and we'd drive uptown where the higher ground was till the water went down. He always had a little pig he raised. We'd put the pig in the floorboard in the back seat, and we'd be in the back seat with the pig and everything. And we'd go uptown at the white community till the water went down, and then we'd come back home. But it never did get inside of our house. That's the blessing, that it never did get inside of the house. But it would rise, it would get up, because it wasn't very deep. And all of that runoff water that came from uptown and above, it couldn't hold it. And it just flooded everything.
Back in those days, you were born in 34.
Right.
We think of the 30s and the 40s. Did you listen to radio?
That's all we had back then was the radio. And I'll tell you what, back in those days, my dad kept the radio on. On the weekends, it was Grand Ole Opry. And through the week, it was Cardinal baseball. And that's all and when he was away from home, we could get something else. But back then, in those days, the baseball team, the Cardinals, all of those teams, I could just about name you all of those players on most all of those teams.
The St. Louis Cardinals.
St. Louis Cardinals, all of those outstanding players they had, and the other teams too in the National League that they played. I could just about name you all of those because that's what it was on. The radio was on the St. Louis Cardinals station there, and they played 3 or 4 games, a night. And then on the weekends, it was Grand Ole Opry. I can name you so many of those. And I'm fond of country and western and bluegrass. I'm fond of it. I was raised up with it. Bill Monroe and all of those guys. Little Jimmy Dickens and all of those different guys. And all of the music that those guys make, and I was talking to a friend of mine, all of the music that country and western guys, it tells a story. It's always something, and I love it. I keep my radio on 99.5 all the time.
Yeah.
I love country and western. I was raised up with it.
Did you ever listen to Bob Wills and the
Bob
Playboys?
Wills and John Lee Wills and them, that's what I was going to tell you. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Every year in Chelsea, they had a jamboree, they call it. The jamboree was where the carnival would come to town. They'd have rides. They've had terrapin races. They'd have all kind of events. John Lee Wills, Bob Wills, Leon McAuliffe, they had a bandstand. All those guys came at different times of the other. They'd have one this year, and Bob Wills, John Lee Wills, and all of those guys came up there. I remember them well, real well, you know. Like I say, I was raised up country and western, you know, and that's all I knew at that time until later on. But I love it today. I love country and western.
Let's go back to baseball. Do you remember any names of baseball players that you rooted for in 30s and 40s?
Well, there was Red Shandy, there was Murray Dixon, there was Harry Burkeen, there was Stan Musial, there was Red Munger, who he was a pitcher. A lot of them that played on the team, but weren't quite as famous as some of them, and I didn't remember them well. But back in the day, I could name all of those guys and play position and everything.
Then you were rooting for the St. Louis Cardinals, but then there was a time you started rooting and cheering for the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Yeah.
And why was that?
Well, I tell you what, back in those days, before integration, the black athletes and so forth weren't recognized. They didn't get the exposure. And of course, one thing that kind of turned me against the Cardinals, made me pull for the Dodgers because of Jackie Robinson, because the way he was treated during his time when he came in. And the first incident that happened, Red Shandy's, he was second baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals. He was the one that brought a black cat out on the field, headed toward Jackie Robinson. And even though we didn't know and understand segregation and at the time all about it, as time went on, we got to know and realize what it was all about. We didn't pay it that much attention. We thought it was some kind of a joke, but after the later years, we realized what it's all about. And I switched sides. I said, well, I don't want to have anything to do with a team that has that type of, that segregates against players and this and that. Of course, back then, it was a lot of that went on. It was a lot of it that went on. And the black players, athletes, and whatever went through a lot and endured a lot. But overall, they stayed in there, and everything began to change over a period of time, and I'm glad it did. But it was really tough sledding back in those days.
You played baseball yourself as a child, as a youngster. About when do you think you started playing baseball?
I tell you what, I started playing baseball in Chelsea. Like I said, we didn't have any baseball. I didn't know anything about baseball and basketball and football. So forth, because we were just elementary school and we didn't have any sports or anything. But what we did, Chelsea High School, they had basketball, baseball, football, and all that. And then they had a Legion team. There was a baseball park that Mrs. Sally McSpadden, Will Rogers' sister, we used to work for those people. She donated some land for this park and baseball field, football field, and so forth. And that's where we used to go and play. We weren't integrated, but I had some good friends. We played recreational ball, and they used to go up to Max Baden Park and play ball. We would play ball from sun up to sundown. Me and a good friend of mine that I was raised up with, he's a good friend of mine, Ralph Terry. I was raised up with Ralph Terry. He used to come to my house and sit under my table and eat. I think we lived about 2 or 3 blocks away from him. He'd come to our house, we'd hunt and fish and so forth. Best friend I ever had, best white friend and black either that I've ever had. And I still commute with him today. He lives in Lerner, Kansas. And he was a 1962 MVP for the New York Yankees. He was a pitcher, and I used to catch him. We used to go up to McSpadden Park. And of course, Ralph Terry was a finesse pitcher. He wasn't a hard-throwing pitcher, but he was a control pitcher. And he was always concerned about how the ball broke or how this happened and so forth. He got good at it, and he, like I say, played with the Yankees for those years. Of course, I played with a lot of other guys there that were good baseball players. In fact, there was a friend of ours that played with us. His name was Galen Hudspeth. Of course, he would turn you around with a baseball. That guy could throw so hard, I'll tell you what. But he wasn't a control type of pitcher, but he was a good pitcher. I played with all those guys up there, recreational ball. And during the time whenever they had American Legion ball up there, coach up there at Chelsea was a wonderful fella. He was about 5'5", I imagine, 5'6" or so. He was the baseball coach, the basketball coach, and the football coach at Chelsea High. And his name was Rupert Cross, a wonderful fella. What he would do during the time when they were playing Legion ball at the last inning, he would let us get in that in the last inning, me and my brothers, in the last inning and get some exposure. But he was an outstanding individual. As time went on, Ralph Terry and I, the guys graduated from Chelsea High School and went on to college and so forth. I kept up with Ralph, and of course, during the time that I was catching him there at Chelsea, he was a Yankee fan at that time. I was a Dodger fan. And he said, Riley, I'm going to play with the Yankees one of these. I said, man, you got to be kidding. You know how you kid like that? And so as time went on, I came down here to go to high school in Claremore, but I kept up with him. And as time went on, the next thing that I knew, he was in the Yankees Farm Club.
Well, we should mention that he was born in Big Cabin, and he was 17 years old when he signed with the Yankees.
Yeah.
And 20 years old when he broke into the majors in 1956.
And started in rotation for the New York Yankees during that time.
And a little bit more about him. He became a two-time All-Star, a World Series Most Valuable Player, and the top right-hander on what many say was the greatest baseball team of all time, the 1961 Yankees.
Yeah.
The only pitcher to throw the final pitch in the two World Series Game 7s.
Yeah.
And, of course, Mickey Mantle was on, Roger Maris, Yogi Berra, Bobby Richardson. On that team.
Bobby Richardson. They have here in Claremore what they call a Field of Dreams baseball banquet every year. They have a lot of the sports writers here, different ones from out of Tulsa, celebrities, all of those television guys and radio guys that come over here. And it supports the Claremore baseball and Rogers State baseball. Well, they have those speakers every year. Bobby Richardson was the 1961 MVP on the Yankees team, and Ralph Terry was the 1962 MVP. I've got some baseballs, I've got pictures and autographs that we took together during these banquets that we had, at different times, autographed baseballs and so forth. But they used to call Kansas City Yankees Farm Club. A lot of those guys that left the Yankees ended up in Kansas City. After a period of time, Ralph Terry ended up there. Well, my brothers lived up in Kansas City during that time. They used to go to the baseball game, and they got in touch, see Ralph Terry. Well, Ralph Terry met with them, and he gave them some tickets. And he'd say, where's my buddy Romy? That's what they used to call me, Romy. He used to call me Romeo, Geronimo, and everything. But anyhow, he said, I got some tickets here. He said, if you guys want to come to the game or this and that, or get in touch with him and tell him. But I never did get up there to get to see him play. Yeah. But he was an outstanding player, and he was really serious. He worked on it. He worked hard at it.
Yeah.
He really worked hard at that.
You and your schooling left Chelsea for high school in Claremore.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
Well, we used to come to Claremore. Before we moved down here to go to school, we used to come down here. My grandmother lived here. I had an uncle and aunt that lived here. So we really chose Claremore, to come and go to school. We stayed with our grandmother when we came down here to go to school. But before we came to school, we used to come down here on the weekends and stay at grandmother's house over the weekend, and we'd go back on Sunday evening. We used to ride the bus. It was 50-cent round trip. The back seat was for blacks. That's the only place you could sit is on the back seat. And if it was full, you stood up. Of course, it was only 18 miles, and we were young, and it didn't bother us. But I stood up on the bus many times, But every time we'd board the bus to come to Claremore, the bus driver, he was the same bus driver most of the time. It was a Greyhound. There were 3 buses that came out of Chelsea, the Greyhound, the MKNO, and Continental. We rode the Greyhound. The fellow that had the bus station there, the Greyhound, his name was George Gooseman. He was a German. He had the Greyhound bus line ticket off. This bus driver, every time we loaded the bus, he stood up. He stood up and made sure and watched down that aisle, made sure that we went to that back seat and sat down. But that didn't bother us that much. Anyhow, we would ride that bus. Then on Sunday evenings, we would come back home. As far as going to school down here, we didn't ride the bus. We drove back and forth every day from Chelsea to Claremore. We drove my dad's car. In fact, the state of Oklahoma paid my dad so much per month to use his car to bus us back and forth to school.
What kind of car was that?
It was a Plymouth. It was an old Plymouth. I don't remember. Well, it was back in the 50s, so it had to have been a 40-some model or so of this, because we didn't buy a new car. But I do know whenever we got that grant to drive us back and forth, my dad had a new motor put in the car.
Oh.
And it really run like a sewing machine. It was really nice. We drove back and forth every day, and they paid him.
In Claremore, which school did you go to?
Well, when we came to Claremore, it was Lincoln School. And Lincoln School is there now over on North O'Whaler Street here in Claremore. It's still intact, and they still keep it up. It's because it's the Lincoln Service Center. That's where they service the buses and school equipment. They keep it up. The floors and things are just as shiny as when we were going to school there. The lockers and things was all in place. And I got to go over there and visit me and the mayor here in Claremore a couple of years ago. I found my old locker, number 44, and that was my basketball uniform, my number in basketball, 44.
Lincoln School wasn't integrated,
It was not integrated. It was not integrated. Claremore High School had their high school and grade schools and whatever, but Lincoln School, the high school when I came down here was only 4 rooms. When I first came to school in 1949, there were only 4 rooms, and after a period of time, they built 6 more rooms with heat and air and lockers, and man, we thought we were just really uptown at that time. Now, the elementary part of the school, there was another building on the backside of the high school, and it was also the hot lunch room and elementary classroom.
Did you play sports in Lincoln School?
Yeah. When I came down here in 1949 to go to school at Lincoln, I hadn't never played basketball. Now, what we did, we had a basketball goal out back of the school where we would shoot. It didn't have a net on it, so we didn't know whether it went through or not, But during the days at Chelsea, that's when we'd seen basketball, and we was trying to learn it and play it. But when I came to Claremore in 1949 to go to school, I didn't know anything about basketball. But I tried out for the team. I wanted to play. And whenever I came down here and got to play, I started my first practice. Everybody laughed at me because the way I shot the ball, because it wasn't normal. Everybody just got a kick out of how I shot the basketball.
How did you shoot the ball?
Well, it wasn't like they shoot it now. It's this kind of a straight motion. I mean, I left the floor and was shooting more like that than I was just in a regular shooting position that they do now. Everybody just got a kick out of that. But as time went on, I practiced, I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and I got to be a pretty decent player. In fact, I could dunk a basketball at the time.
You could dunk it?
Yeah, a few times I could dunk a ball. I could jump higher than anybody on the team. But I made the team. I started in 1952. We won the state championship. And in 1953, we were runner-up to the state. In 1951, we went to the semis before we were eliminated. But we had some outstanding teams. In 1952, we won 30 games and lost 3. In 1953, we won 25 games and lost 2. So in those 2 years, we won 50-some-odd games and lost 5.
Wow. How tall are you?
Well, I was 5'8", but the doctor said I'm 5'7.5" now. You know how it is whenever you don't stand straight as you age and so forth.
Right.
But if they had been keeping up with rebounds back in the day, like rebounds and assists and all of that stuff like they do now, I would probably have 12, 15 rebounds a game, so average that.
Did you play the Claremore High School?
No, Claremore High School never did play us. We never did play with Claremore High School. Now, I'll tell you what we did do. We scrimmaged the OMA that used to be here in Claremore. Military Academy, the OMA Military Academy. They had basketball. We scrimmaged with them, and we beat them. That was a college, OMA. They had swimming pools up there, heated swimming pools. After the game, we'd go swimming. Boy, we enjoyed that so much because we weren't used to anything like that. What happened, Red Cross organized the benefit game at the Armory here in Claremore between Oklahoma Military and us. They beat us out in that game, about, I think, 5 or 6 points.
Claremore High School, more than likely, if you played them, you would have defeated them.
I'm sure that we would have. That's why I imagine that they didn't want to play. But we had so many white supporters that followed us and came to our games. I had 2 fellas that I named that was outstanding individuals who are here today. One of them is and one of them isn't. Jim Marshall was one of my top supporters, white guy. There was another fella, Bob Weber. He was a supporter of ours, didn't miss a game.
So when you say state championships, what did you mean by that? Of black schools?
Black schools. I'll explain that to you. Back during those days when I was playing, there was only 2 teams that went to the state tournament. You had the district tournament, and the first and second place team that won the district tournament, they're the ones that got to go to the state. But also, if you won the most games, even if you didn't win the state, you got to go. We won the most games every year, and every year before the district tournament, they gave a percentage trophy. The percentage trophy was a trophy, the team that won the most games in the conference. We did that 3 years in a row. So we got the percentage trophy and the district trophy. I don't remember but 3 teams that ever went to the state. I remember Pawhuska was the one that gave us the most problem when we, Pawhuska. Pawhuska went to the state a couple of times, I believe. Nowata went 1 year, and Bartlesville went 1 year. And our conference was Claremore, Veneta, Nowata, Bartlesville, Pawhuska, and Lennepo.
And those are all black schools?
And Harmony, all black schools.
Yeah.
Also, we went to Kansas City and played. We played 2 teams up there. We won 1 game and lost 1. We beat Northeast High School up there in Kansas City. That was in Missouri. The next night we were playing the largest school in Kansas City, Kansas, Sumner High. Sumner High is still there today. It was an all-black high school, the largest school in Kansas City. And they beat us, I think it was 5 or 6 points. But the thing about it is, what happened, the refereeing was bad. There was only 3 fouls called on Sumner High School through the whole game. 3 fouls called on Sumner High. But the thing about it is, Sumner High was a large school. They didn't want to see a little country school like Claremore with 82 students come and beat them. So naturally there was some, calling that they should have been made that wasn't made, because they just wasn't going to have a little school like us beat them. But what was really interesting about it, after we had got back home from Kansas City trip, the athletic director up there at Northeast High School in Kansas City, he wrote a letter back to the city of Claremore. I've got that letter. I've got a lot of stuff that I didn't bring with me I was going to show. But anyhow, he wrote a letter back to the city of Claremore and Lincoln School. He said, "Your team was the best team that we've ever seen in many years. And if the officiating had been better, the outcome would have been different."
Were those referees black?
Yeah. But they wasn't going to have a city of 5,000 and a little school of 82 students come out, and 60% of it was elementary.
Yeah.
And they wasn't going to have a little team out the country come up there and beat them. They couldn't have lived it down,
When did you graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1953.
You were playing baseball too, weren't you, in this time period?
Yeah, well, during the time that we was in high school, yeah, we played baseball. We didn't play with the Clowns. We had a junior baseball team during that time. A guy named Angeli Alexander, he got a bunch of us high school guys together. He's on that picture over there, and he got us together, bought us some uniforms, and we were called the Hot Shots. We were a junior baseball team, and we always played the game before the Clowns did, you know. What he used to do, he used to haul us back and forth. Every town around here had a baseball team, recreational baseball team. All of these towns around here in Oklahoma. Veneta, Norwater, Bartlesville, Tulsa, T-Town Clowns, Wagner, Muskogee, every team back then had a recreational team.
Were they blacks and whites?
Black. No, just black.
Just blacks.
Now,
okay.
we did play whites. We played a lot of whites.
Yeah.
But later on, the whites began to come and play with us because they loved to win and wanted to play with us. And as things began to change, lots of guys here in Claremore, white guys, they came and played with us. The Hendricks brothers and Carl Coleman and all of those guys came over across the tracks and played ball with us because they knew we was winners and played and they wanted to win. But before then, they didn't play with us. Tulsa T-Town Clowns, some of those guys on there, if times would have been different, could have played professional ball, numerous guys.
You talk about the Clowns, you're talking about the Claremore Clowns.
Claremore Clowns.
And they were a semi-pro.
I'll tell you about that. Anytime you go professional, you get paid for your services or whatever during that time. We were called semi-pro. They didn't get a salary, but what happened is whenever they had a game, whenever they took up the gate receipts, they charged quarter or 50 cents for people to come in. And of course, you could stand out on the street and watch them just as well as you could, but you didn't have a place to sit down. We did have some little bleachers there and a little pop stand and so forth there where they could buy pop. But the money that they took up, they played on a 60-40 basis. The home team got 60% of the gate receipts and the visiting team got 40. That's why they called them semi-pro, because they were getting not a salary, but we got enough to buy beer and refreshments and, this type of thing, and enjoyed that.
But the Clowns, they did a comic routine, didn't they?
Yeah, they did a lot of different antics, and this and that back during those days. That's why they were called the Clowns, and also the T-Town Clowns. They were the same way. They did a little clown acts, different things,
So they'd come around and play these home teams that you just talked about.
Yeah.
Did you play then with the Claremore Clowns?
Yeah, in later years, yeah. The original Clowns, they were playing ball in 47 and 48. That's when they were original Clowns. Those were the original Clowns. Now, the original Claremore Clowns, most of those guys, after they aged, some of them's kids played after we kept it going. See, we kept that going plumb on up until, let's see, 57, 58, somewhere in that neighborhood. We still were playing. We go to Joplin, Prairie Grove, Arkansas, play up in Missouri. All of the teams in Oklahoma, around here we played ball. We used to go over to Salina and play, over to Kenwood. And they played up there with a settlement called Four Corners over there in Salina. And that's why they had a baseball. There were four roads coming together there, and I guess they called it Four Corners. And we played the Native American Indian guys. I know those guys. They love to play baseball. We would play one game, and if it wasn't dark or getting late, they'd want to play another. And so we'd play another game. But they loved to play baseball. They were always nice to us, and we'd go swimming over there in that lake, over there, but grand, those lakes that are all over in there. We'd go swimming in them holes down there where the water was getting cold. We just have a big time over there. There's 2 or 3 guys on that team right there that could made major league players. Of course, just like I say, there wasn't any exposure, you know what I'm saying.
But you were in your 20s, early 20s, when you were playing.
Yeah. I was a fairly baseball player. When I left Chelsea, I was catching, because I caught Ralph Cherry recreational and this and that. And when I came to Claremore, I quit catching and moved to third base. And that's where I stayed most of the time. I did a little pitching. I wasn't a real good pitcher, but they put me in there and, and so forth. But third base was where I played most of the time. I had that down pretty good. I had some clippings that Ralph Terry, whenever he came down here to do a Field of Dreams baseball band, and talking about I was the best catcher he'd ever seen back then. I've got all of those clippings when we were playing and what happened.
Around this time, too, I think out of Kansas, professional teams came down. They played in Muskogee, and Jackie Robinson also was in the Negro League at the time that was going on. Were you familiar with the Negro League and those players that were playing?
You're talking about the Kansas City Monarchs?
Yes.
We didn't get up into that league, and I don't remember much of them. playing. But you know, the Negro League back then, they had Josh Gibson and all those guys. And then you had the Kansas City Monarchs, the Chicago Black Sox, and all of those different teams, which were outstanding players, but they weren't recognized in the white league, you know. And a lot of those guys, Satchel Paige and all those guys that played with Kansas City Monarchs, Josh Gibson, all those guys, outstanding players.
Yep.
But they didn't get the exposure because they weren't in the white league or black.
It's interesting how you said the whites came and they wanted to play in the black team. So isn't that called integration?
Yeah.
And so here we go. They didn't care if you were black.
That's right.
They just wanted to play ball because you guys were good.
That's right. And I'll tell you what, you take the black communities, all of the black here in Oklahoma, mostly there was a dividing line between them and whites. And what I'm trying to say is this. They were segregated and discriminated against on living where they lived. Because most all of you black, it's just like Shoto, Oklahoma, over on Highway 69 south of Pryor. There was a black community down there south of Shoto. It's called Brushy Creek. And all the blacks in these communities, they lived on these creeks. Brushy Creek, Lightning Creek up in Norwater, Panther Creek on the other side of Chelsea, Bowling Springs and Pryor Creek up there on the other side of Chelsea. They lived all in those areas. Over here on Brushy Creek, that I'm talking about south of Shoto over there was a black community, and a lot of those guys came on up here because we had a baseball team and played ball with those outstanding individuals. Heck of a baseball player. John Ryder, Son Ryder, Lois Sale, Willie, the Liggins brothers, and all of those guys, the Van brothers, Charles Ray, and all of those individuals played baseball with outstanding baseball players. Charles Ray played on our team. He was an outstanding player. And most of the time on our teams, we played multiple positions, the guys did. They could play any position. And that's what happened. Charles Ray was an outstanding player. I hated so bad he got killed, him and his son, going home. It was raining, and I don't know where they had been, but they was going down 69 south of Shoto there. You turn off to go to where the community was, and it was raining, and this truck hit him, and he was killed, him and his son. But his other son, Johnny Ray went and played professional ball with the Pittsburgh Pirates. He played 10 years for those Pirates.
Yep.
When he left the Pirates, I think he went overseas and played a couple of years or so, and then he came back to Shoto, where he makes his home now. Well, they call it Shoto, but it's Brushy Creek. And of course, they have a Johnny Ray Day, and they got a street named after Johnny Ray over there in Shoto. And that was Charles Ray's son, so he come out of a good family as far as baseball, and those guys were outstanding baseball players in their own right. And they came up here to play with us because they didn't have a team, and they all came up here and played with us.
Was it confusing to you that when the white ball players came to play on your team, that what is this about racism, and why are you playing with us when in other ways of life we can't even eat in your restaurants, we can't even use your restrooms?
You're exactly right. But I'll say this, John. I'm so proud to be here from Chelsea and Rogers County and Claremore. There never was a lot of racial fanfare or anything that went on here. Oh, I imagine there might have been a few little words or skirmishes, but nothing that would cause attention. But the guys were accepted here so well. The white guys, that we had a lot of Indian guys that played with us on that team. They just wanted to play ball. In Claremore white community, they didn't have a city team. And those guys that had played ball in high school and Legion ball, they wanted to continue playing ball. They came over and played with us. Just came on over and started playing with us without fanfare. They were just accepted just like one of us. There were some good ball players there that came over too.
But in Oklahoma, there were restaurants who denied service to blacks.
Yeah.
Did that happen here in Claremore?
Yes, I will tell you this. You hear this, blacks had a place in life. That's the way they always said. But blacks could not go to restaurants. They couldn't eat in the restaurants. They always had a place back in the kitchen for them. You couldn't go to the movies. What we did go to one movie here, the Yale Theater, and we sat up in the balcony. but you couldn't use the restrooms. You paid your money to go to the show, but you couldn't use the restroom. And why would it make a difference in people using the restroom? What we did, whenever we had to go to the restroom, we had to go over to the Rogers County Courthouse and use the restroom. The Rogers County Courthouse, the basement stayed open all the time in those restrooms. The Rogers County Courthouse had black and colored stalls, had it wrote on the doors. I can remember it so well. They had 2 stalls, said colored and white, 2 stalls for colored and the rest for white. And why in a restroom, when you go to the restroom, that it would be discriminated, segregated in a restroom. And I'll tell you one thing. Back in those days, they used to use the N-word frequently, openly. It wasn't hid or nothing. It was openly. I'll never will forget. I used to ride the bus back and forth to Claremore, from Chelsea to Claremore, all up and down Highway 66. You know, the road signs that they have for restaurants and businesses and so forth, all that. There was a cafe called the Grand Cafe. They had signs up and down, the word "in" chicken.
And
Nigger chicken.
chicken.
All up and down these signs. And in the window, it's right up there in Veneta now. It's Clanton's Cafe now.
Yeah.
It used to be the Grand, and that's what they had, the word "in" chicken. Because they always branded the black man for fried chicken, you know. And they heard N-word fried chicken.
All right.
All up and down these signs, up and down the road.
Oh, so that was a good thing for the whites to eat the end chicken.
Well, right.
Everybody thought, well,
That the blacks,
that was a good form of chicken.
connoisseurs of fried chicken. And now they eat more than we do. You know how it's ironic. You have to laugh about it, but that's the way it was. And while we were on that basketball story here, I was wanting to tell you about winning the state championship and going to Nashville, Tennessee to the national. We were constructed like the NCAA tournament. It ain't like it is now. In the largest schools, there was the A class, B class, and C class. Now, the largest schools were A class, Booker T, Oklahoma City Douglas, you know, Lawton, all of those big cities, you know, and they had a lot of students and over. They were A class. B class was below, Sand Springs, Sapulpa, Muskogee, all of those teams B class. And C class was tons of them. All of them in my conference and all of those other teams, Spiro, Willika, Wetumpka, tons of C class schools. And that's the way it's constructed. And what happened, the 3 winners that won the state, the A, B, and C class that won the state in their division, they went into a playoff. The A, the B, and the C class had to play each other to get to go to Nashville, Tennessee, to the national tournament, where there was teams all over the United States, out of Texas, out of Kansas, out of Missouri, out of Kentucky. It was constructed like the NCAA. When we went into the playoffs, which was down at Langston University, that's where we had the playoffs, we beat Sand Springs. And Sand Springs was B-class team. That's where Marcus Haynes came from, out of Sand Springs. He wasn't there when we played them and beat him, but there was another fella, his name McDaniel. He was an outstanding player. But we beat Sand Springs, and then Saturday night we played Booker T. Booker T beat us about 6 or 8 points to get to go to Nashville to play in the national. Of course, we went down there, and I'll tell you how we got there. After we had had such good years playing, the city of Claremore, the black community got together and they rented us a station wagon and gave us expense money to go down to the national tournament. And that was quite a treat. That was quite a deal for us, all us basketball players, to go down there. And of course, we'd get down there in that part of the country, and a lot of places they wouldn't let us buy gas or use the restrooms or anything, you know, being black. And we couldn't buy food. We couldn't do that. Yeah. They didn't tell us. If we couldn't find a black restaurant or some store where we'd buy bologna and cheese like that.
I guess you just accepted that because it was a way of life. Didn't it make you mad?
Well, no. That's back to what I'm saying. It didn't make us mad. It didn't make us mad. It was just a way of life. That's just the way it was. Yeah. You know, people get upset more now about it because of what it was, and they realize what it was all about. But back then, we just accepted it was just a way of life for us.
Yeah. You traveled in the South. How about the Deep South?
No, the only place that we went was Nashville and Memphis. We went to Memphis. We spent the night in Memphis. So happened there was a pastor used to be here at my church. I belonged to Bethel AME Church here in Claremore. And there was a pastor back in those days that pastored Bethel, and his name was Reverend Granberry. And he moved to Memphis. That's how we stayed overnight in Memphis. Our coach and all of them, they knowed him real well and this and that. And he had us come to his home. He had a nice big home. Well, what he done, we fixed pallets on the floor. And we all slept on the floor in, his house. Of course, we got out and went down on Beale Street and fooled around, and visit and so forth. And then we got up and went on into Nashville. But it was quite an amusing trip. And I wish that some of the guys would have taken cameras and had pictures that we went to those different places. We went to Fisk University, beautiful black campuses down there. Fisk University and Tennessee State, all of those. The finals were held at Tennessee State University. All the rest of the games were held in a high school called Pearl High that was in Nashville. That's where we went to watch most of the games till the finals. They had it at Tennessee State. But anyhow, as we were going down there, they wouldn't let us use restrooms or sell us food. And what happened as we drove out through the countryside, we would find a grocery store that had bologna and cheese, a meat kind of like it, all them lunch meats, good lunch meat back then. The coach, Mr. Moss, would go in and check with the guy and ask him, could he bring us in and slice up some lunch meat and so forth. He said, yeah, bring them in. They had some of them old wooden booths. And he'd slice up a bunch of bologna, a lot of that Longhorn cheese, and different types of lunch meat and so forth, and crackers, and we'd get us some pop. That's what we ate if we couldn't find very few black restaurants that were down there. But we enjoyed that and went on. We didn't pay any attention. But we did, when we were on our way back from down there, I think it was on Sunday, we found a black restaurant that had a lot of soul food.
What would you call soul food?
Soul food is fried chicken, black-eyed peas, candied yams, pig's feet, all of this type of stuff that blacks, they brand blacks to love to eat, and everybody eats it now, though. Short ribs, cabbage, cornbread, cobbler, and all of this type of stuff. They had a music box. We call them jukebox, and you put quarter in or whatever to play music. We went in there to eat, and they had a little dance floor there you could dance. But they wouldn't turn on the music box until after church was over, afternoon. You couldn't dance or turn on the jukebox until after 12 o'clock. After church was over, then they'd turn on the jukebox and you could dance and play music. But Booker T, I'll tell you, Booker T. Washington, the year that we went down there, that's when Booker T went down there. And Booker T played in the final. A team out of Kentucky, Paris, Kentucky, beat them. And of course, Christian was our main rival. See, Christian was C-Class. See, Christian won the state 2 or 3 times. And they went to the national 2 or 3 times. Now, the guy told me that Christian won the national down there once. I don't know for sure. I don't have the information that they did, but he told me about that.
Well, let me take you a few years down the road. What did you begin to do when you weren't playing baseball and basketball and all that? What was your life? What did you do?
After my baseball and basketball career, I joined the Marine Corps. In 1954, me and a friend of mine on that championship 53 basketball team, Alonzo Rogers Jr., we joined the Marines. I stayed in there for a while, and he stayed in there and made a career of it, Alonzo Rogers Jr. I came out and fell in love and got married. And he stayed 20-some-odd years. He got involved in volleyball. I kept up with him, and communicated with him, and he began to referee volleyball games. He got interested in volleyball, and then after that, he became the head volleyball coach in Washington, a girls' volleyball coach in Washington.
Okay. But you were married.
I'm married. I came back and married. I married a schoolmate, Marie Johnson, and we had 4 children, 3 boys and a girl. When we were married for a while, I went to work for Phillips Petroleum Company. That's where I really had some rough times as far as being black. things that happened.
You tried to integrate Phillips 66 service station?
Phillips Petroleum Company at that time didn't hire many blacks at that time. In 1958 is when I started with them. But my brother first started with them, and I imagine that's why he went and joined the service, because it was kind of rough and he might not have could stood the pressure on him. And he went and joined the Army. My younger brother worked for him before I did. He worked for him in 57. And I worked for him in 58. And I think that what happened, he went on and joined the service to get out of it. And then they hired me in his place. Back in those days, Phillips didn't hire many blacks. Well, I don't know how many black managers they had in their retail outlets. Very few. I would probably be second or third in line for managing one of the retail outlets of theirs.
And which one? Where was it located?
Out here on Highway 20 east of town, there was a Howard Johnson restaurant and a Phillips 66 service station that sat over on the Will Rogers Turnpike. And that's where I started out in 1958. I started out as porter, was the lowest man on the totem pole. And that was cleaning the place, keeping things clean, cleaning restrooms and this and that. And in peak times, I did work the driveway some, where they service cars and so forth. And after I worked at Porter for that time, they made me driveway salesman. I worked on up. In fact, it took a while for me to make driveway salesman. And I sold more merchandise on that driveway than most of those guys out there that were driveway salesmen. Tires and batteries, I'd go out there and sell a set of tires or something, a two a deal like that. It's just about knowing how to talk to people and how to present yourself. I did that, and then after that, they needed assistant manager. One of the friends of mine said, well, Riley would make a good assistant manager. He said, well, he couldn't handle that. That's what the manager said. They got in a conversation about it, and a friend of mine said, well, why not? He knows everything that the other guys do and other things. So after that, they finally made me assistant manager. Then after assistant manager, they made me manager. So I went from porter, driveway salesman, assistant manager, and manager. And it was a hard fight. There's times that I started to quit.
Why?
Because of the pressure, the things that they did.
What did they do?
The first thing that happened is I started in November. It was November, I never shall forget, November of 58. And all of the stations at that time, they had a Christmas party. And I wasn't invited. They didn't invite me to the Christmas party. It didn't bother me. What we were talking about, it's just the way of life, and you didn't really realize what was going on until later and later in life. The manager at that time, he didn't tell me that I was not invited. It was one of the employees there that came to me, and he said, Riley, they're having a Christmas party, such and such a date and this and that. He just told me that I wasn't invited. I just took it right on chin, didn't say anything.
Did they do anything else to you?
That was the first incident of racial injustice that happened. Then, as time went on, every employee had a key to the cash box, made change, people paying for gas, and that's not, it wasn't modern. We had a cash box that sat out there, locked in, and everybody had a key. Every employee that waited on people had a key. You didn't have just one key to wait on somebody, because busy times you couldn't do, but everybody had a key. And what happened, you checked out every shift. We had 3 shifts, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7. Each shift checked out. Check out each shift to see if there's any shortage, and you check the next shift and leave them even. And they began to have shortage. They employed so many different people that came in there, employees, work 6 months and leave, or 3 months and leave, like that. And you never really knew who that you were hiring. They didn't do background checks, they didn't do drug testing and all that like they do now. But anyhow, the cash box did come up short, and they began to point fingers at me. And that's the way it's always been. In fact, that reminds me of back in the day of slavery, that the black man didn't have a voice, he didn't have a say-so or nothing. And if a white person pointed his finger at a black person, that the black person did that, they took his word for it. You didn't have no say-so. You were just guilty. But all of this shortage began to happen, and I wouldn't take a penny in the world from nobody. Never would, never will. That kind of got next to me when I knew I wasn't doing it. The pressure got really, really bad. In fact, there was one time that I went to go home and they had put a snake in my car. And they know a lot of people are afraid of snakes, and then I was too. Big black snake, about 6 foot long. They didn't turn him loose, but they tied it to my stern wheel to where he couldn't get loose. And then when I went in, I seen this big snake wrapped around I closed the door and run in there. And one of the guys come out there and got it out. Now, I didn't report none of this. I didn't report none of this stuff.
You could have to Phillips' people.
Well, maybe I didn't report it or anything to higher up or anything, and I don't know whether they know it today.
Yeah.
But anyhow, as time went on, I had a good friend that worked with me, and his name was Wayne McDaniel. He was a good friend of mine, a Christian fella. We were talking. We call a dog house. There's a house on the driveway down there where you stay and wait on customers. Well, the station was up a little further, the main station, but we stayed down there in the dog house, we call it, and wait on customers. And I was talking to him about quitting. He said, Riley, listen, he said, you're a good employee. He said, don't quit. He said, things are going to get better. He said, I guarantee you. So he might have had some input in reporting things, but anyhow, I stayed on. And as time went on, things did begin to get better. And in fact, the manager that was there when all of this was going on, they moved him because they used to move managers around. And then when he left, things really did get better. Things began to break. Things began to open up.
Did you work for Phillips for many years?
I started to work for Phillips in 1958, and I retired in 95. I worked 37 years for him.
Oh, wow. In retail places?
In retail.
In gas stations?
Yeah. In fact, I started out here on the Will Rogers Turnpike, east of town off of Highway 20 on the Turnpike. They had a big Howard Johnson restaurant and Phillips Station there. I worked there for 20-some odd years. When I first started to work out there on the Turnpike, there was a lot of business up down that Turnpike. But after years passed, over there at Catoosa, they opened that up. And they built that 244, I-44 through there, and they began to build truck stops. And all bloomed up over there. And whenever they got all of those established over there and built, then the turnpike traffic for service stations went down. And so after a period of time, I don't remember what year, they closed that station out there on Highway 20 where I first started and moved me up to Veneta, Midway, up there where the big McDonald's. Phillips took over those stations. Conoco did have those, but Phillips took them over. I managed the station on the eastbound lane for 8 years, and then I retired out of there.
Yeah.
I drove back and forth every day, 72 miles round trip.
Did you ever encounter the Ku Klux Klan in this area?
No, we never did. We never did, and that's back to what I'm saying. They did in Tulsa, but for us here, there wasn't any of that action around here. And that's why I say Chelsea and Claremore, I'm so proud to be here and from it, because there never was really any real extreme situations that came about from segregation. One thing that I was going to mention when we lived at Chelsea, the people up there treated us so good. My daddy, they all loved him and respected him so much. Mrs. Sally McSpadden, I was wanting to talk about her. Will Rogers' sister had a big home up there in Chelsea, and they just about took care of us. See, my daddy on the side, he chauffeured for Mrs. Sally McSpadden and served parties, and we'd all go up there. She'd want us up there a lot of times. And what we did, we worked up there in the yard in the summer, took care of the grass and mowing. They had another black man, his name was Gus Rogers, who took care of the cows and horses. We worked in the gardens. Every time we'd go up there in the morning, Mrs. McSpadden's daughters that lived there with her name was Helen Eaton, she'd tell us, come on in, boys, and get you something to eat. We'd go in there in the morning, they'd always fix a glass of milk, or peanut butter and jelly, some kind of sandwich, something. Every time we'd go to pick up milk, and they gave us milk, so we'd pick up the milk. We worked there in the summer, doing the yard and in the garden. Daddy chauffeured and served parties. And when Will Rogers would come in, My grandmother worked in the kitchen, and she always would tell us how Will Rogers would come in and put a $10 or $20 bill in our apron pocket because they had big get-togethers there at Mrs. McSpadden's place all the time. And a lot of times after Will Rogers' death, his buddies would come up there still and visit his sister, Miss McSpadden. Because Will Rogers was raised up around Chelsea and Oologah and Claremore and all that there. They would fly in there, those guys in them planes, they had them Piper Cubs. There wasn't no big planes and jets or nothing back then, you know what I'm talking about. And they would fly in and they'd land out there in the pasture. See, they had a lot of property out there. And they'd land out there in the field, and we'd go out there around them planes and look. They always carried orange stakes. They drove it in the ground and then tied a plane to it to keep it from blowing away. Them Piper Cubs were made out of canvas. They were light. And they would always tie them down, anchor them down to keep them maybe blowing away.
Will Rogers died August 15, 1935, when you were just a year old.
Yeah.
But then you heard stories about him through his sister.
In fact, Mrs. McSpadden, I'll tell you what was touching to me. Miss Sally McSpadden, a wonderful lady, she was sick, terminally ill, and her daughter that lived with her, Helen Eaton, called us all in the house and said, Mama wants to see you. Well, she had a big bedroom upstairs, two-story house up there, still there. And Mrs. McSpadden called the kids all in the bedroom and talked to us, me and my two brothers. My sister wasn't born. She called us boys in there and just hugged us and everything, talked about she loved it. It was so touching. We know that she was terminally ill, you know, and she wanted to see us and talk. She just hugged us and loved us so much. They just about took care of us. They done so much for us, my dad. Helen Eaton stayed with her. That was her daughter. And Helen had a daughter that was named Lucia. Lucia got married there in our house. Of course, my dad served that wedding. And we were up there. We were up there when Lucia got married, her granddaughter. We were all there, her and all her relatives, Clem and Bowman, all of them, her brothers and things, you know, that was all up there.
What was Will's sister's name again?
Sally McSpadden. Clem was a nephew.
Clem
Bo McSpadden was a brother, and she had 2 or 3 brothers. They were all nice people. They treated us well. They had the cows, and they gave us usually a gallon of milk every day. We'd go up there and pick up the milk. They really were nice to us. They just about took care of us.
Yeah.
They were wonderful people. I can't say enough about them. I just love those people. And that's why I say we never had any hard times up there. There was always going to be a smart aleck in the bunch of the crowd that's going to draw attention. But all of the guys that I was associated, Ralph Terry and all those guys, decent guys, respectable guys, they were on our side.
Yep.
There's always some guy wanting to start trouble. We had one guy up there was a smart alecky type of guy. There was a cafe up there in Chelsea. His name was Ed South. Him and his son Clifford South run it. We call it the Greasy Spoon. He used to make the best hamburgers and homemade chili and stew you don't lay your lips on. Them hamburgers, them greasy burgers, he'd put that meat on that grill and then mash them onions in it and cook it in them, you know, and that. All those were the best. But we ate there. He had a place for us in the back, in the kitchen where we sat down and ate. That's where they hung out, a lot of the guys did.
And by the way, it's hard to imagine you are 87 years old. I mean, that mind of yours. Did you ever have any health issues or problems down through the years?
Well, no, I never did have many. I do have, at this time, I am a diabetic, and I've got high blood pressure, but my blood pressure and stuff is mostly under control. I don't know about my blood sugar because I'm eating some candy now, but I've had a good life. I haven't had any major issues or anything. I do remember what happened when I was playing baseball. The only problem that I had body-wise at that time was we had a ball game scheduled for a team, and they didn't show up. We just chose sides in between the guys that we had there and played the game. Because people that came, I was playing third base, and we got a guy trapped between second base and third base. I was running him down, and somehow my spike hooked into the base or whatever that was, the ground, in the wrong direction, and my leg twisted and broke all the cartilage loose in that knee. Fortunately, I didn't have to have surgery. My doctor at that time, they didn't have all the techniques. That was in 1957 or 8. My doctor at that time, he said, Riley, you broke all those cartilage loose in your knee. And what he did, he put it in a cast. That leg was in a cast for 6 weeks. And after he took the cast off of it, that leg had shrunk so bad, I didn't even recognize it. So he said, Riley, he said, I want you to do some therapy to bring this leg back to where it should be. And he told me to every morning in the bathtub run full of hot water and get in that bathtub and work that leg and work that leg. And by George, it came on back over a period of time. It took about a month or so or somewhere back that. And it finally came on back to where I could play ball again. I mean, and this through that therapy that he showed me, this water, and sitting back and forth and exercising that leg back and forth, did an outstanding job. And I don't have any problem with it today.
Good. So you are a historian yourself. The Claremore Museum of History has installed a permanent Black history exhibit, and according to the website, Building Heritage, History, and Hope, to present an inclusive representation of Claremore's history. The exhibit had input from Black members of the community, such as you, made a major impact in that. Tell me about it.
First thing I want to say is we've got an organization that formed here in Claremore. They picked a number of guys here at Claremore. They got a committee, and it's called Claremore Athletic Hall of Fame. They had, I don't know how many members on that committee to pick different guys who had performed well in sports and went on and did well, to go into the Claremore Athletic Hall of Fame. That happened in 2018. I was in that first class. I'm in the Claremore Athletic Hall of Fame. Me and my coach and another Black guy, his name was Kenny Kennard, we went in that first class of Claremore Athletic Hall of Fame. The next year, we had another guy from that championship basketball team, and I'm trying to get them all in there. And this is where it started. We should have, I thought about it afterward, the whole basketball team, we should have went in there all together, which would have been more, than just take them year after year. It takes so long. But we've only got 3 left, so I'm sure that I'm working on it to get them in this next class. But anyhow, this Claremore Museum of History started. They were recognizing the businesses here in Claremore, but they didn't recognize, and a lot of people still don't know this day, all of the Black business that was here right in Claremore. And they were just south of the courthouse here, right in the city limits, on South Missouri Street, all up and down there on North Owella Street on this north side of town. I had been doing some history on the Cherokee Nation, the freedmen, slavery, all of this. I'd go into schools, they'd get me to make speech to them. I've been in school and spoke to classes, historical societies and this and that. Whenever they acquired this old library, the old library here in Claremore from the city, to make a museum of history, our former mayor, Tom Poole, I never shall forget him. He was a big supporter of us when we were playing ball. He was in school at the same time. And he got to be mayor of Claremore. Well, when he retired, they made a museum, this old library, they acquired it from the city. They got to working on it and revived it, and it's a beautiful place. It's beautiful inside. It really is a nice place. Tom talked to me one day. I was over there visiting. He said, Riley, we need to get some information about the Black businesses and so forth here in Claremore. He said, do you have anything? I didn't have anything, but I want to work on it. And if you look back and see the pictures and the business they talked about in Claremore and Old Claremore, they didn't include the Black business, but they were here. But that's the way it was back then. I guess they figured that they just wasn't going to include them because of the way of segregation and discrimination. But all of those businesses that they didn't include or didn't have pictures of, you would thought they would have had pictures of some of them, like they did the white, but there wasn't. So that tells you something. Just south of the Rogers County Courthouse down there on South Missouri, there were lots of Black business. There was barbecue, restaurants, beer. There were 3 Black hotels here in Claremore. There was the Johnson Hotel, there was the Cobb Bath and Hotel, there was the Beaches Hotel, there were beauty shops, There were grocery stores. There were red light joints, all of this type of stuff, all of those business, barbershop, beauty shop, all of those type of business was here in Claremore. And they were black-owned business. Of course, over on North Owella, just below the school, there was a grocery store, Sanford Taylor's grocery store, and tavern, pool hall. All of that type of stuff was right here in Claremore. And a lot of the people, like I say, in Claremore didn't know that. A lot of the people didn't know that and live right here because it never was brought about. And so I began to work on it and bring it out. I picked up pictures, what I could, different information that I could get about a lot of this stuff. One thing about it is I was one of the few people that lived in this because I was down there in it. And when I was a kid coming up here in school, my grandmother and them didn't allow us to go down in the south part of town, we called down there, because it would get kind of rough down on Saturday night. They had gambling and they had all of this type of stuff down there, right here. That's when all the people came out on Fridays and Saturday nights, down there. They didn't allow us to go down there. In fact, my cousin got killed down there, and I was down there. I lived in all of this stuff, and I've got documentation, and I've got pictures and things to show for a lot of this. It's like a deed to my church that you're talking about. It's over there. We loan it to the museum. It's a loaner. You can donate or you can loan. Now, a lot of it donated. I've donated my diploma and my 8th grade arithmetic book is all over there, and a lot of different stuff, pamphlets from our school, our state music festival. It's beautiful. It's a nice display, one of the best around. And I worked on it, but what happened after Tom had reached out to me for this, it wasn't long before he retired, but he was on the board. And they brought another fella in to take charge of it, and it didn't move under him very much at all. Then once he came in and got in, and then that COVID came in, and that put a damper on things. So we're sitting here about 3 years with nothing. And I'm still taunting this thing and talking to people. We need to get something done because I'm not going to be here forever. Now, I've got a documentary over there now also at that museum. But anyhow, we got a new director that came in named Steve Robinson. Very fine, knowledgeable fellow. They put him in touch with me that I'd been working on this project and to get the information about the black community, the businesses, and the people that left here and went on. We've got guys that came out of Lincoln that went on to be doctors, lawyers, different ones. First black highway patrolman came out of there, Ronald Johnson. They played on that state basketball team with me. Bryce Van went on to play professional basketball with the Kansas City Steers, at that time was the American Basketball League. Lonzo Rogers, who went on and got to be a head volleyball coach, like I was saying, out to Washington. Dr. Charles Williams got to be a dentist. He came out of there. He had a practice in Kansas City. Died this last year before last. And Dr. John Algie, he came out of there. He was a black doctor that came out of there.
Out of Lincoln School.
Lincoln School. Judge Darnell Jones, his mother taught there. He went to elementary school there. He's a federal judge in Philadelphia now. Bush appointed him. He's there now, Judge Jones. And I'm in touch with all those people. They were down here when we had our opening of the museum on Juneteenth.
Okay.
But anyhow, as time went on, Steve Robinson, a very knowledgeable man, he's the director over there. He's on the board of directors, and he got things moving, and outstanding job. We done research to make sure that everything was true.
Yeah, those black businesses you talked about, what happened to them? Did people just move away or they die? Or
well, this is the problem. Most of them moved away, passed on, and their kids didn't keep them up or do anything, and they were all dissolved, and so forth. That's just the way the black business are. That's just like here in Oklahoma. All the black towns. Oklahoma has more black towns than any state in the Union. And most of them are dissolved now. All of those towns that use Redbeard, Porter, Tallahassee, Summit, Clearview, all of these black towns, Boley, and all of those black towns, a lot of them aren't there anymore. And I've been to a lot of them, where they had black business. But that's what happened. The population here in Claremore, the black population, there used to be lots of blacks here. And as the older people died out, the younger generation didn't keep things. They moved away. Most of them went off to college. And they didn't really come back to settle here because the opportunities and chances were greater in other places. Mm-hmm. Let's be in a small town, and the opportunity they had a broader scope that they could work from and get things done and to accomplish things that they wanted to accomplish.
Yep. Here we are in 2021. How many blacks or percentage of blacks?
Oh, my God. There's very few. There are very few blacks that live here that are originally from. Now, there's quite a few blacks around here that I see around here. I guess they work at Centerlift or living out edge of town. And I see them all the time, and then some of them may be from up to the college, but very few original blacks that are here.
Yeah.
I imagine there's not 15 or 20 families of original Claremore people, blacks, native, that was raised up here.
Yeah.
But there are some still that's moved away in Texas and different places that are living there that I am in contact with occasionally. I can tell you right now, there's about 10 people living that went to Lincoln School that's finished over there right now, only about 10. And a lady friend of mine, Mildred Harlan, she is the first black to attend Claremore High School when it integrated.
Oh.
Mildred Harlan, she's a lady friend of mine. They integrated schools in 1955, and Mildred Harlan and Mary Snoddy and William Snoddy, the first 3 blacks to attend Claremore High School and graduate.
How about that?
They're over there in that museum.
Yeah.
And that museum is very innocent. There's photos there. There's pictures of the basketball and baseball team, the 1953 state championship trophy. And all of the information over there is 99% true.
Yep. I want to thank you for what you've done here. Your mind is so clear at 87. Did you do anything special to be able to live to be 87?
No, I listen to my doctors. I stay active. As a kid coming up, it's strange how we came up back then. And I'll say this, we didn't go to doctors. If we had an accident, we used to go barefooted in the summer, and we'd cut our feet and the rusty nails. We didn't know take tetanus shots. We didn't know anything about it. We'd pour some kerosene on it. Keep going. We didn't go to doctors. If we got a cold or the old-time influenza, Mom would fix us some broomweed tea. You don't know what that is, but it's out there in the pastures right now. Get that broomweed, boil it, and make tea out of it. Rub us down with mentholatum or Vicks. The main thing was the good Lord looked after us because we didn't have no other way. We didn't go to doctors. White doctors didn't doctor on blacks. That's the way it was back then. And you had to improvise, and that's what we did. But here we are today. A lot of us strong and still going and never went to doctors.
Yeah.
All of that flu and pneumonia and stuff you had, your body resisted it.
And now you've gone through a pandemic.
Yeah.
And COVID.
Well, I've had my shots. I just try to do what my doctor said. A lot of people will. I know my wife had passed away a few years ago. She used to have a problem about the doctors, talking about doctors. These doctors might not know everything, but they keep us living. Modern technology and medicine and doctors keeps us living longer.
Yeah, exactly.
We're living longer now than we ever have. I would tell her, I said, won't you quit going to the doctor and spending money? Just give that money to me or whatever you're going to do and quit going to the doctor if you're not going to do what they say. But I tell you what, when you treat people right, and that's what I teach my kids, treating people right and believing in the good Lord and trying to do the thing that's right, it has a lot to do with that. When you treat people right, don't misuse people, and live a good life and do for people whatever you can and want to make people happy. It's a good life. It makes you feel good.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you then, your advice to young people listening to this, that would be it, right?
Yes,
right.
Yes, to be truthful. Just like I tell my kids, I said, listen, if you tell a person something, you hold to it. I mean, if you tell a person you're going to do something, I say that means a lot this day and time. It used to be years and years ago, I don't know whether you've heard it, if a man's word wasn't any good, he wasn't any good.
Yeah.
And that's what they used to live by. And just like I told them, I said, back then a handshake mattered. Those people lived by handshake. They didn't have no lot of contracts and this and that. Them guys shook hands on what they believed in and said, and it was true. That's what I tell my kids. If you tell someone something, you hold to it. I said, if you can't, don't tell them. I said, just don't say nothing. That's the best way in the world. But I said, be a person of your word, is where people can depend on you.
Do you think your children are listening to you?
Yeah, they're listening to me.
Good.
They're listening to me.
And what are their names, by the way?
My oldest name is Maxine. My second is Gerome Jr., and then Howard, and then Steve, and then Marlise. I've got 2 girls and 3 boys.
And grandchildren now?
Yeah, I have to count 2, 3, 5. I've got 9.
Wow.
I've got 9 grandkids and 4 great-grandkids.
Well, how proud you should be of them and your life.
I tell you what, if I had put a price tag on all of the stuff that I did for people and all of the money that I spent, I'd be in pretty decent shape. But I'll get mine above. I'll get mine in the end. That's why I'm looking to get my glory.
But it made you feel good, too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't feel bad about not anything.
No. It was my honor to interview you today and to talk. You're a great speaker, a great historian, and Claremore is fortunate to have you. So thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it very much.
All righty. You're welcome.
You have been listening to the Voices of Oklahoma podcast. Stories taken from the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com. At the website, you will discover an array of storytellers. Many you will know. Some will be new to you, but all will be worth your time. This work depends on listeners like you, who are interested in learning about the great people of Oklahoma. Our website provides an opportunity to donate to this 501c3 project, which preserves Oklahoma history, one voice at a time. voicesofoklahoma.com.